Okay, so you've definitely heard the word Machiavellian thrown around, right? It's usually to describe some kind of power-hungry villain or a super ruthless politician. But where does that actually come from? Today, we're going to dive right into the source, Niccolò Machiavelli's famous book, The Prince, to figure out what it's really all about.
So let's start right there. What does that word Machiavellian actually mean to you? It probably brings up images of someone who's cunning, deceptive, and only looking out for number one. But is that really the whole picture? What if the book that started it all wasn't an evil manifesto, but something more like a practical guide for survival?
And this chart really gets to the heart of it. The myth is that The Prince is basically a handbook for villains, all about being evil just for the fun of it. But the reality? It's, well, surprisingly different. It's actually a pragmatic, logical, and often brutally realistic look at what it takes to get power, hold on to it, and keep a state from completely falling apart.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty. At its core, The Prince was basically an advice letter written to a real ruler, Lorenzo de' Medici. So this isn't some lofty philosophical text. Nope, it's a practical manual, a how-to guide for navigating the incredibly messy and dangerous world of 16th century Italian politics, and most importantly, how to stay in charge.
Okay, first, a little vocab. There's a word you're going to see a lot, principality. It's just Machiavelli's term for a state or a government. But he makes this really crucial point right at the start. It is way, way harder to rule a territory you've just conquered than one you simply inherited from your family. This one idea sets the stage for pretty much all the advice that comes next.
So here's the bottom line. Machiavelli lays out some really foundational rules. And he is blunt. First, rely on your own soldiers, because mercenaries, totally useless and you can't trust them. Second, your number one job above everything else is the survival of the state. Third, you've got to be flexible. Adapt your strategy when the situation changes. And then, here's the big one. You have to be willing to separate your personal morals from what's necessary to protect your people.
This brings us to what is probably the most famous question in the entire book. It's a dilemma that leaders have been wrestling with for centuries. For a ruler, is it better to be loved or is it better to be feared?
Seriously, think about it for a second. What's your gut answer? One of those sounds so much nicer, right? So much more noble. But Machiavelli, he wasn't interested in what sounded nice. He was interested in what worked. And his answer is famously cold and calculated.
His logic is pretty chilling, but it's crystal clear. See, being loved is based on people's gratitude, which is fickle. People will break promises and those bonds of love the second it's convenient for them. But fear? Fear is based on the threat of punishment. And that, he says, is a much more reliable, much more constant motivator. It's how you maintain control when things get really tough.
He just sums it all up so perfectly here. Basically, love is a bond that you let other people hold. Fear is a bond that you hold yourself. For a ruler whose entire state is on the line, one of those is just way more secure. It's a harsh truth, but for him, it's absolutely essential for stability.
But just being feared isn't enough. And this leads to another huge theme in the book, this constant battle between a leader's skill, what they can control, and pure random luck. And to make his point, Machiavelli uses this fascinating real-world example. He holds up this one guy, Cesare Borgia, as the ultimate model of an effective prince. Now, Borgia was the son of Pope Alexander VI, and he was known for being brilliant, ambitious, and just unbelievably ruthless in his mission to build his own state in Italy. I mean, according to Machiavelli's playbook, Borgia did everything right. He was smart, he was strong, he used deception like an artist, and he was never, ever afraid to be ruthless to grab power. He was the perfect embodiment of everything the prince advises.
And yet, he failed. So why? Well, because as Machiavelli points out, no amount of skill or planning in the world can completely protect you from just plain old bad luck. Even the most perfect prince is still at the mercy of chance.
So here's how it all just fell apart. Borgia's power totally depended on his father, the Pope. But then, two things happened at the exact same worst possible moment. His father died suddenly, and he himself got deathly ill. His enemies jumped at the chance, and his entire life's work just collapsed. Not because he made a mistake, but because of terrible, terrible timing.
So why are we even talking about this 500-year-old book today? Well, because it offers this powerful and, yeah, often uncomfortable lens to look at power, leadership, and politics, even now. And this gets us to what might be the book's most important and, frankly, most unsettling lesson.
The qualities that make someone a good person in their everyday life are not always the same qualities that make them a good leader of a country.
Machiavelli just puts it so bluntly right here. If you try to be purely good and moral all the time, in a world full of people who aren't, you're just setting yourself up to fail. A leader, he argues, has to know how to operate in the world as it is, not as they wish it would be. Reading this can really change how you see modern politics. It starts to explain why leaders sometimes have to make these really difficult, unpopular choices for the sake of long-term stability. It gives you some context for why a politician might dodge a question or seem deceptive. From a Machiavellian view, they might just be doing what they think is necessary to survive.
And that leaves us with this final, really provocative question. The prince forces us to ask if our definition of a good leader is even right. Is it about personal virtue and always doing the right thing? Or is it about being effective and being willing to do what's necessary, no matter how hard, to protect the state and its people? It's definitely something we're thinking about.